For those of you who don't know, my name is Esther, and I'm the studio coordinator of photography and new media here at Anderson Ranch. During the winter months, I run a photo club that sort of engages the local community in dialogue and looking at artists. And given the current climate of everything, we decided to do everything virtually, including photo clubs. So we're super excited. We're also going to go ahead and extend it into May and possibly June. So we're super excited about that too, but it will continue to be virtual. So get used to this setting probably for a while. I'm sure we all have been doing that before. But another thing that I want to bring to everyone's attention, if you are just joining this Zoom from a link from a friend, or if you're watching on Facebook and you want to be part of the Anderson Ranch photo community, please feel free to email me your email address, and I'll be happy to add you to the mailing list, and that way you guys can get information. I sometimes send links and resources and things like that, so it's just send me your email address and I'll be glad to put you on the email list, and you can get any resource that I send out to the photo community here. I do have a PDF of resources that I am going to send out, but I'm going to send it out tomorrow just so that everyone can email me if they want those, and then I'll send it out to everyone new who's on the list, anyone new who's watching. If they want to leave it in the comment or in the chat section, that's totally fine. Either way, I will be more than happy to get that information to you. So how today is gonna kind of go is I'm gonna turn it over to Andrea. She is our director of artistic programs and the director of photography, and she's gonna be sharing her work. She's gonna share her screen and share her presentation. And then after that, I've also invited some other photographers and artists who are, we're all kind of in the quarantine together, and I've asked them to sort of share what they've been working on, how it's changed how they're teaching, maybe it's changed how they approach their work. And so we definitely want to hear what they have to say. After, one thing I do want, we want to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions, and if you guys could certainly utilize the chat aspect of Zoom to ask those questions to Andrea when she's done, that would be great, and kind of keep it streamlined. And that way we're up to, almost 50 people, and that way 50 people aren't sort of talking over each other. How you get to the chat is at the bottom of the window, of the Zoom window. There's a chat icon, click that, and it'll bring up the chat, and then everyone can see your questions. Just make sure that you're sending the chat to everyone and not just one individual person. That way we can see it. But that being said, Andrea Wallace was born and raised in Massachusetts, and she received her MFA from the University of Colorado Boulder, and she's exhibited work widely, nationally, internationally, all of those things. And I'm sure we all can call Andrea a friend, I'm sure. But I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to her. And as you come in, I just wanna remind everyone that you're automatically muted. And that way we don't really pick up any ambient noise. And that way everyone can hear what Andrea is saying and all of those good things. So I'm letting more people in. This is great. So Andrea, I'm going to turn over to you if you want to go ahead and start sharing your screen, and I will go ahead and mute myself.
I'm going to share it. We practiced this, so we'll see how this goes, because I screwed up a few times. So
if I can say one more thing, since Andrea is going to be sharing her screen, I don't know what view method you guys are on, but there is at the top a speaker view, and that means whoever is speaking, their screen is going to be the biggest in your Zoom window, and that way you can see her images in full. So I just recommend doing that as well if you haven't already. So,
okay, great. So I'm going to share this. Let's see. Can everyone see that? Okay, great. So I kind of changed my talk for this a little bit. And so I'm going to start just with a little bit of background, and then I'll kind of go into a few different projects, and then kind of my most recent project and my most long-term project. So I wanted to start with showing some images of my family and kind of the family album that I looked at when I was growing up. And this is a picture of my mom. And I lived with my mother and my grandmother, and they had this album of pictures of my mom and her brother, my uncle, and my aunt. And I spent a lot of time looking at these images that I think now, looking back, really informed how I think about photography and how I think about how the interest I have in connections and relationships. And this is my mom and her sister. And I spent a lot of time looking at these images, trying to kind of imagine another time and another place that the photography let me go to. And I also think, as I look at these images, I actually think they're pretty great photographs. And I think they influenced formally kind of the way I make portraits. So these are some of the pictures. This is my mom and my uncle when they were little. So I spent a lot of time looking and perusing and thinking about photography and its ability to capture a moment in time and hold that moment true, and then allow me to sort of imagine what these lives were like, what these people were like when they were children. And I think that these kinds of images were my first exposure to photography. This is my aunt and my mom, who's total rebel, and I think my aunt was always a little bit irritated with her. But I think that these are the kinds of images that I was interested in, and these are the kinds of images that informed my interest in pictures really early on. And then I'm just going to fast forward a few years to my first self-portrait. And when I was like 11 or 12, my mom had a friend who had a 35 millimeter camera, and then gave me this little camera, and I started making photographs. And that's kind of my first thing. And I remember setting this image up, and I wanted to start it to, I think it was a way for me to kind of explore who I was as well by using photography. So this is kind of a self-portrait I made when I was about 12. And then this one was another self-portrait I made when I was about 11. And I set the camera up, and I had my mom hit the shutter. But this was kind of my first foray into photography. So when I think back, I think it was always with me, and it was a way for me to gain access to something other, a different part of myself and a different part of other people. So now I'm going to really fast forward, and I'm just going to show you a quick project, which was my graduate work. And I've always been interested in people, and I've always been interested in stories. And again, photography has been a way for me to access other people, people that are like me, people that are very different from me. And so when I was in graduate school, I wanted to do a project. I was interested in storytelling, and I was interested in documentary work. And I put together a project on a ranching community in Colorado. And I started making portraits of people who were choosing to ranch as a way of life, as opposed to selling their land where they could make more money. They were choosing this way of life to pass down to their children and grandchildren. So I spent about 3 years initially making these portraits. I had a 4x5 view camera, and this is Clovis and Chauncey. They're named after their dad's favorite rodeos. And I was really interested because I'm from the East Coast. So coming out to Colorado in the West, I wanted to explore what this place was. And photography has always been a way for me to explore a place by photographing the individuals who inhabit that place. And I was interested in this idea of like people's personal stories, but also like the dualities of success and failure, of struggle, of vulnerability. And so I really spent time in this community, this is Velda, making these photographs. And they were kind of romanticized. They were like these people with these wide open landscapes, which was really different from, you know, where I grew up in Massachusetts. And this is Hank. So I'm just kind of go through these. This is Daryl. And these are the Baumgartners. They're fifth. They themselves are fourth generation on this land, and I was photographing them and their children and grandchildren. So these are some of the images that I was making, and this is Danny and Mary. So I would go out. This is kind of what it would look like, and I would just spend time with the families, and I would construct these kind of formal portraits. And again, always sort of referencing back to a lot of these kind of gestures and body language that I saw in my own family albums when I was growing up, those kind of first images that were meaningful to me. And this is Dan and Mary, they're siblings. And this is Mary and a friend and their cattle dog. So I'm just going to kind of go through these projects. So I worked on that project. I actually worked in that community for about 6 years after graduate school as well. And then I was sort of looking for a new project, but again, it was like I wanted to explore place, and I wanted to explore it by photographing individuals who inhabit that place. And so I started making portraits at a hot springs called Indian Springs. It's in Idaho Springs, Colorado, and I had seen this sign on the highway and I didn't know what it was, and so I went, and it was this swimming pool. So I started making these portraits there of people, of bathers, and I was interested in like the different people that came to these hot springs, their vulnerability. I was interested in connection. I was interested in gesture. So this is Tom. And I was still photographing in black and white. And then I realized pretty quickly that really this place was about color. And it was about people in bright colored bathing suits and these plastic tropical plants they had brought in. And so I got permission, and I would set up and I would invite people to come over and have their portrait made. And this is Irene. And this is Donnie and Dominic. But it was really a different experience because I wasn't making these long, like I wasn't spending a lot of time with these people. I was maybe spending a half an hour making their portrait. It was very different than this sort of long-term documentary I had worked on in Kremling. This is Kelly and Shelby, and I was also interested in these bands. People wear bands to denote which polls they're allowed to enter. So I did this for a while, and I would make the exhibition would consist of prints, which were about 40 by 60. So they were really large. But I guess I was also interested in like this idea that by using a view camera, which I was doing at the time, I was able to sort of like really kind of study them and study their faces and study their bodies and their body language. And that's what photography was allowing me to do. It was allowing me the access that I wouldn't normally get with these individuals whom I didn't know. This is Tina, and her little sister is behind her. This is Diane and Valerie and their siblings. This is John. He worked at a porn store in Denver. So I worked on this for a couple of years, off and on. But the other thing that was happening in my life at the time was that I had gotten married and I had had a child, and then I was getting divorced. And so I had become a single parent. And so it was getting harder for me to go away and work on these documentaries whether I'd be in the ranching community or in the hot springs. I wasn't able to do that because I had a little baby. And so I decided, really based on a friend of mine, Mia, who had encouraged me because she had done something similar, to do a blog. This is when everybody was doing blogs. And it was a way for me, I'd started this blog, it was called 40 Plus. And it was just me basically taking snapshots every day. And I did an image a day for about, I don't know, a little over a year. And it was just like documenting. It was still documentary, but it was actually moving in a more personal direction where I was documenting my life, which I had never done and honestly actually been really scared to do. I was much more interested in like finding people who had stories that were similar to my own, or finding that kind of vulnerability without actually going too personal by actually making work about myself, which was always a little scary to me. So, but I started doing this, and at the time that I started this blog, my mom had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I had to fly home to Massachusetts, and I had to clean out her house, and I had to move her out here to Colorado to put her into a nursing home. So I started just making images of everything I was doing. And so when I flew home, and I had this little camera and I just carried it all the time. This is a picture of my mom on her bureau, you know, in the house where I was going to clean it out. And then this is my son at the time. And these are like paintings that I was moving out of the house to either sell or bring back to Colorado. So I just started making these images. This is like, you know, a little landscape, kind of thinking about what I was feeling that day. It was tough going back there to do that. This is a self-portrait. So I started, actually my work took a complete shift, and it was really like at the suggestion of like my friend Roddy and Mia, and really encouraging me to like, okay, you know, you're in a place in your life where you're a mom and you're a single mom, and you can't go away. So why don't you get your camera and focus on what is in front of you? Which I always thought might be too boring, or maybe too vulnerable for me to do that. But I started making these images, and this was like when I came back to Colorado, this was a representative of like what home was to me now. It was no longer my mom's house, which had been like my grandparents' house. It was like my home I was making here in Colorado with my son. And then I had taken pictures from my mom's house of my uncle and my mom and my aunt, and I brought them back to her in the nursing home and then photographed her holding them. So I would take my camera on dog walks and make images. I would photograph the dead goldfish because we accidentally fed it dog food because we ran out of fish food and, you know, it died. I photographed my son. And I just started, it was like a visual journal, but what it worked was it was committing to a practice of making images every day. And it really changed the way I made images. And I was teaching a class in Paris, and this is in the taxi cab driver and my son from the back seat. This is Nikolai. So I just kept making photographs, and then sometimes I would put them up, sometimes I would write about them. And then at one point said, Andrea, you know, your blog is like pictures of your son and your dog. And I'm like, well, you know what? That's pretty much my life right now. This is what it is. And they were all these domestic images, but at the same time, you know, I was still thinking about light. I was still thinking about more formal aspects of photography, but I was just using like my iPhone or this little point and shoot. And then, you know, I was trying to, you know, use some humor. I mean, it's a funny image. So this is what I was doing for a year. And then I decided to kind of maybe make some, what I thought were more serious images. And I moved to this project called Toward Amnesia. And I was thinking a lot about memory because my mom was losing her memory. And I was also reading a book at the time about, a book called Toward Amnesia. And it was a book about a woman who, it was a fictionalized book about this woman who is going through a lot of pain. And she actually wanted to bring amnesia on. She wanted to forget because kind of her current life was just too painful. So I was thinking a lot about that. I was thinking, because at the same time I was going through kind of a breakup and some difficult things in my life. And my mom was also losing her memory. So when I made this image, I started thinking about, you know, just like family and physicality and connection, which has always been part of my work. I was thinking about, again, like gesture, but I was also thinking about like generations and how, you know, as my mom continues to move and lose her memory, you know, I become the keeper of her memories, and then my son will kind of carry that on for me. So I started making images, and I'm only going to show one today, but I have a series of triptychs that I made of my mom and my son and myself. And then I also was in a difficult time and thinking about, in some ways, wanting to erase my own memories of like a relationship that was really painful for me to let go of. So in this book that I was reading, this woman was like immersing herself into cold showers and cold lakes because there's this kind of like amnesia that can be brought on by submersion in cold. So I thought, well, I'll try that, which, you know, it didn't work, but I thought I'll try it. So I would photograph myself lying in the snow. And I did a lot of self-portraits during this time. And I just kind of at the time just wanted to escape, and I kind of wanted to just go to sleep. And this image is what was the visualization of those feelings that I was feeling. And then at the same time too, I was started to photograph more what I was connected to and the people and children in my life that I felt a connection to. And this is Nikolai, which is one of my best friend's son. And then I was making photographs, you know, of myself, and this is called The Kiss, and this is Bo and me. And then this is me, you know, in one of my cold showers, trying to bring on memory loss. So I was doing this series, and I worked on this for a while. I worked on making images of connection. But I was also doing a lot of self-portraits, and this is me, where I was submersing myself in cold mountain lakes or cold showers or the snow. And then I was also photographing between self-portraits and then portraits of my child. So there was a lot of dichotomy going on in the images and then in what I was feeling. This idea of like yo-yo, and then this is a portrait of Mia and photographing people I'm connected to. So this really brings me to my next project, and this is the one I'll just spend the most time on. And so as I was making these images, you know, one of the things that came out of that most obviously was I was photographing my son, and I was also photographing his best friend, Nikolai, and they were young, little, you know, they were like 5 and 6 at the time, or 4 and 5. And then I started thinking more about them and their journeys and their, you know, their vulnerability, but also their connection and about boyhood. And so I started this series called Fraternal, and I started making portraits of Bo and Nikolai. And I think what I was interested in is this idea of boyhood friendships, and they kind of exist from moment to moment. They're never taking time to be concerned with each other's appearances. Sometimes they're in imaginative states. Sometimes they're in more, realistic, grounded states. And I was thinking also about gender and about that construction and movement towards masculinity. And so the images started as like these portraits, of the two of them together. Nikolai, who's a year older than Bo, had very long hair and was often mistaken for a girl. So I was thinking a lot about gender and how we construct gender. What are the expectations of boyhood about their connection, their vulnerability? So these are some of the images that I started with. They're constructed images. So people sometimes ask me like, well, did you just find them a certain way? And the answer is that I spend a lot of time thinking about images I want to make with them. Sometimes it works like they're out playing in the mud in the garden. So that already is happening, but then I come out and we construct an image together. Probably me more doing direction and them just sort of going along. But I was thinking, the project really becomes a lot about, what does it mean to be moving towards masculinity? What does it mean to be moving towards individuality? What is the vulnerability with masculinity and gender? And I feel like as the kids are little, it's a lot more fluid. And as they get older, Nikolai had a haircut, I think, when he was 10, and immediately, that long hair is gone and he's no longer mistaken for a girl, and he's getting older and he's becoming more what we would consider maybe more stereotypically masculine. But I've been working on this project since they were 4 and 5, and now they're 15 and 14. I think that also, Nikolai's, as you look at the images as we move along, Nikolai tends to, definitely emulate his dad, who was in the military. And you can start to see him take on more of that sort of maybe masculine energy, where in the beginning or in the middle, Bo is still sort of a little more fluid, a little more younger, and maybe more in an imaginative state in boyhood. And I put this image in too, just to kind of give you a context of how it works. So this is kind of really what's happening in me making a photograph of the two of them. And then this is the final image. So I'll just flip back. It's definitely something that, it's not necessarily recording exactly what's there. It's really creating an image. And at the end of the day, we might photograph for half an hour. And at the end of the day, the image becomes Bo with, his night, hat on, as opposed to without. So these are some of the images that I've worked on over the years with them. I wouldn't say they're always super cooperative or that interested in making the images. So now we kind of move towards they get payment as models, because we just take that kind of out of it and we keep moving on the project. I think that also as they've gotten a little older, the images become more individual, meaning that I'm making more individual portraits of them, partly because they're becoming more individual beings. They're becoming more into themselves, and also because it's sometimes a little easier because I don't always have access to both of them at the same time. I'll just kind of keep going through these. But I think what I'm interested in is these isolated moments of connection with me as the photographer, and their connection with each other. And then, here's an image, when I have an exhibition, the images are large, they're framed, but the boys interact, and are part of this, they see the images, they come to the exhibitions. And it's just kind of interesting as we go along how they reference back. But I put this image in too, to kind of see, you can kind of see that, there's Nikolai in sort of real life, and then there's Nikolai in this series that I've constructed, and it's different. This was in Croatia. But they continue to have a level of intimacy that I want to access and I want to image, but they're also, physically very different. And I think just as people, they're becoming, much more different people. And now they're teenagers, and that's a whole other potential, I guess, for making photographs in a very different way and how they get represented. And I just have a couple more and then I can end. So more recently, the last couple images I have, this is Bo, and I've kind of been working more in like diptychs and triptychs, and probably, you know, influenced by a lot of photographers who work in this vein. But I kind of moved out so that there's a little more going on, especially as I create more individual images of them and not them together. And again, you know, this is my son, but I'm still trying to talk about gender. I'm still trying to talk about like some fluidity and balance between femininity and masculinity. And this is Nikolai. And then lastly, is a little outside of this, but I've been making portraits of Bo with me, because I kind of see the writing on the wall too, that he's moving, you know, through teenagehood and out the door. And so I think I'm looking to make more images that of my connection and intimacy with him as he moves into being a teenager and then kind of off and on his own. So that is it. So Esther, I'm not sure what I need to do.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sure we would all be applauding if we were all together. So we can certainly open it up to questions. If anyone wants to either type one in the chat or to unmute yourself, you can hit the space bar, or you know, just go ahead and chat if you want to. Just try not to talk over too many people, because we still have about 60 people watching, so wow. There's a lot of people. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in.
Can I jump in, Esther?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Andrea, I know Andrea really well. I know your work really well, and it's always great to hear how when as we grow as photographers, we kind of recontextualize what we're doing. And I'm interested in. It's great to see your journey as a photographer, and I'm really taken by the point you reached when you were doing the blog. You know, it was obviously a kind of a transitional period in your life also, but it seems to be that project is where you really find your voice as a photographer. I know you started off as a newspaper photographer, and you were doing, you know, for journalistic work, and then you were doing the documentary work like the Kremlin Project and the Hot Springs, but there was, you know, maybe the lack of a understanding of what the personal connection was there. It seems like from the blog onwards, you know, you found your voice, you found your stride in photography, and became much more confident about how you're using the medium. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think because I went to school for a more kind of commercial and technical kind of background, and then I worked as a kind of newspaper photojournalism. So that was my interest, is storytelling. But and I think it wasn't until, you know, I could not go out and work on documentaries. Like, you know, I worked in Alaska. I worked on, you know, about women, doing a story about women along the Alaska pipeline. I'd done all these documentaries where when I could freely travel and have that access. And it wasn't until I had a baby and I couldn't, that I had to figure out something to do. And it was kind of a little bit like the blog was a good way for me to open up and start looking at my own life and domesticity and what that meant, and also finding a way to still make interesting images, because I think for many people, including myself, we think that the photography has to be of the other or something else, and that there's nothing in our own sort of like own little world that is worthy of making images of. And also I think maybe that's changed now with the iPhone, because now everyone has a camera, everyone's doing Instagram, everyone's doing Facebook. So we are all making those kind of daily pictures maybe, but at that time it wasn't quite there. So and even for a long time too, I would say, well, that's my blog. That's not real serious work. That's just snappy stuff. And here's my serious work. And it's taken me a long time to kind of, with the lens of looking backward, to be able to say, actually, it was meaningful work, and it actually moved me, onto something new. And actually, Bo just came in, so you probably
Andrea,
something, yeah.
Andrea, I have a question for you, and hello to Bo.
Hi, Bo.
I haven't had the privilege of seeing your work before, and I was just touched image after image. They're so rich and so well done, and so full of suggestion and humanity. And in watching, I see your voice all the way through all of the projects. And I am wondering if you had ever considered or would think about going back into all of the work, including your family archives, and editing across all the projects. Have you thought about that? Because personally, I think it would be so interesting to see the work great like this, but like, what would it look like if you let all the images be in conversation?
You know what, I think that's a really great idea. And you know what, this is the first time I've ever added like some of all the family work, all that, not the family work, but my family archives, like those images of my family from when I was young, and some of my self-portraits. And it's the first time I just threw it together this afternoon and put it in, thinking maybe I should actually give some context. And so I think that's a great, thank you for that. And I think it's a great prompt, because I think as I started to lay it out today, I thought, oh, maybe there's some potential in really like having those images speak to each other. And even in a formal way, when I started really looking at, I don't know if it was my grandfather making these images or my grandmother, but I thought, well, there's a pretty good photographer there. And I think that really, if I look at some of the images that I make in terms of the formality of it, it's definitely stuff that I saw from, when I was little. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'd be very interested to see it.
Well, good. Maybe if you get here this summer, or whenever we get you out here, we can look at it together.
I'd be thrilled.
Andrea, there's a couple questions in the chat. The first one is, can you talk about the light is it real, artificial, natural, that kind of thing? And then Catherine has one, and then Jeremy has one. So if you can pull them up, or do you want me to read them to you, however you want to do it?
I'll let you read them to me, because I have no idea how to pull
Okay,
them
why
up.
don't you address the light question first?
So the light, when we're making photographs, it's a reflector. When I'm photographing outside, I use natural light, but I do use bounce. It's just a reflector. And so I use that to bounce light. And I also try to shoot, in more diffuse light, and then I add a little bounce. And that's the complexity of my lighting scenario.
Catherine's asking if the current situation with the pandemic affects your perception of intimacy, and which is so important to your work. And if so, how do you see the events of today making it into some future work?
Well, yeah, I've been thinking more. I mean, I think what I've been thinking about with like this last image that Bo and I made, like actually a while ago, but is that I think I'm interested in making images, of people in my life that are close to me. And so right now I'm sort of mostly, for the most part, with my son. And so I'm thinking about maybe making more work with him around our intimate connection, or and so that because of this quarantine, I think that's what's available to me, but also it's probably a good prompt for me to move in that direction. What do you think, Bo? He said yes. He said yes.
Right. The next question is from Derek. I feel like such a true moderator. So, he says, do you envision how the series may continue to evolve and adapt with time and the continually changing mediums available to all of us? Or do you see a purity in the stills that you've curated over all these years?
Well, I had thought for a long time about using video and adding sort of that dimension to the work with the boys. I feel like a little bit like I missed the boat on that. But I don't know, maybe there's an opportunity to add video as they're teenagers, or add video or sound in the way they talk about the work or think about the work. But yeah, I'm not sure that, I'm not really sure about that.
Let's see. Derek, and then just a statement. Appreciate hearing about the distinction between the boys as boys and then as models, and different in a formal creative statement. Yeah, I think we all can agree that we feel like we've watched Bo grow just in these images, which is kind of cool. I personally, if I can just interject, I was wondering how, like, in whatever moment you decide that that work is over and how that moment comes, but is like, have you ever thought of, you know, the obvious photo book, like telling the story of, you know, them growing up and then like growing up together and then more apart? Is that like something you ever sort of think about in like the finality of the work?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, you know, the work gets shown at, you know, in exhibitions from little bits in here and there. And I feel like it's not going to really be into, there's a totality of the work. And, you know, my thought has always been that I do it until they're 18, or that's what I've sort of said to them.
Yeah.
But I think that, yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with Radius Books about a year and a half ago. They like the work, but what, you know, the feedback is it's not done. And so until it's done, and whatever that means, whether they're, you know, 18 or they're 20 or they're you know, men, or whatever we decide, it feels like it needs to wait until then. And then I would hope that it could definitely be in a book form.
Yeah. Jeremy had a question. Does documenting such personal subject matter affect how you experience your relationship with the boys or their relationship with each other? And does the act of observing these relationships change the relationships?
Well, you know, at one point, you know, I think, I mean, I feel like it's brought us closer in some ways, like being able to have this shared project together. But I also think, you know, there's this thing where Bo has said to me at times, Mom, please be my mom and not a photographer, you know? And so like, please, like, I need you to just be my mom today. I don't want to be photographed while I'm sick, or I don't, you know? And so there has been some conflict, which I know a lot of mother photographers have engaged in, who photograph their children or their families. And so there's often this line of like, but I really want to make this image and the light is perfect. Come on, we're gonna make this image. And then sometimes I have to stop because it's not, you know, he doesn't want to, or they don't want to, or I need to work quickly because what I think is making an image quick, which might be in 30 or 45 minutes, that's not what Bo thinks is quick. And Roddy's laughing because Roddy has witnessed a lot of these exchanges during the photographs, where Roddy has been and said, why don't you not try to make the photograph? And I'm like, damn it, we're gonna make this photograph. So
I'm holding the reflector.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it goes both ways. Do you want to say anything about how you feel about the project? Can you say anything?
Yeah, I like having the project, and I really like looking back on the old images, like from when I'm 7. But it's a pain because, especially the one with me in my Nordic suit in the snow, that wasn't very fun because it was like 10 degrees out, and that thing is designed so that if you're working hard, you're warm. It was just like some other ones. There's one where we're leaning up against the wall a wall in the sand pit, and the wall gave us both a rash, and the sand got everywhere. So it's like there's a little bit of comfort involved with it too.
You should have kept the journal book.
So there's two more questions. I'm going to start with Zakria's and then go back to David's because I think his is a good ending point. But Zach was wondering if there will ever be a time where Bo would influence your work with his words, actions, or like things he makes himself. And does he get a say at any point, or is it just kind of you directing him? And Bo can answer that one, yeah.
Sometimes we get a say on like the details of how we're standing, but usually no, it's more what my mom decides to do.
Nice.
Well, and that, you know, part of that is that's why they get paid now. We kind of take out me screaming or me saying, look, do you know how much I do for you? Why can't you make a photograph for me? That doesn't work. So we decided to just give an hourly rate. You're being paid as a model. So you're going to model and move your hand and just cooperate. So but I actually think that when they were little, they got Legos and then they weren't so interested in getting a new Lego. So now they get money. And I think that's just a way because they're constructed, they're fictionalized images anyway. They're not, you know, in the sense that they're coming out of my imagination, they're coming out of who they are. And so it's not like I'm actually trying to capture, you know, reality. So I think it works to just let them be models.
But in some cases too, the image is based off of what we're doing at the time. Like the river, we were actually at the river to be at the river, and then mom decided to take a picture.
Yeah.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, Bo, what's like your earliest memory of this project?
I remember about half the images, but I remember the first one with me and getting offered a popsicle to stand in front of a fence, and I'm like, oh my god.
Primary from the beginning. I like it. So, okay, one more question and then we'll end on David's. But Sam was asking, has photographing Bo's childhood informed or brought up any memories from your own childhood?
Oh, definitely.
As they are,
yeah,
they
definitely. And so, and you know, one thing I didn't get into that, you know, that I haven't really talked about because it's just too short of a time, but you know, like my interest in the boys too, aside from that he's my son, but you know, I was a tomboy and I kind of wanted to be a boy. And if you look at all of sort of the photographs of me when I'm little, you know, I look like a boy. I act, you know, and so sometimes when I'm making images of them, if I were to bring up, and maybe this is a way to put these images together at some point, some of these images are very similar to images of myself, and Bo and I actually look quite a bit alike from at the same age. So I definitely think about referencing my childhood or being in the out of doors and things like that were part of my childhood.
So the last question, it's from David Hilliard.
Should we let David? Is he?
Yeah, totally. And then someone was also asking about like what programs you're teaching this summer. So if you want to kind of hit on that too. But if David, are you here?
I just unmuted. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes, I can hear you.
David, go ahead.
Oh, I typed it in. Okay. Hi, everyone. Andrea, I have to say I got to your lecture. Hi, Bo. I got to here a little bit late. I've seen you lecture a few times, so my question may have been answered. I'm not sure. I thought that you could maybe speak a little bit about how we come up with ideas. You come up with ideas for pictures and like this preconceived idea. We maybe think of a location or see something. We have an idea of what we want, but then you come up against somebody like Bo who has his own ideas. And energies and how you negotiate those moments. You talked about Legos, and I've been there with Bo. but also like weather and other elements, and just like how you deal, like the collision of serendipity with like your intentions, and how that acts on a picture. And maybe you spoke about that in your lecture, so I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I think that's a good question. And David has also done some series of work on Bo. So he's also brought with Legos and done that with him. But I mean, I think it's the same thing. I think sometimes I think about images, or I often think about a location, and then I think about placing them. But I also think sometimes I see them doing something like with squirt guns, and then I think, well, we need to make an image that represents that squirt gun, the squirt gun, that sort of part of maybe boyhood or even masculinity, and how do we make that? And then I think about where, and often I'm thinking about quality of light, and then and then I present it. And I think, David, what I was saying earlier, sometimes we get into a struggle where Bo wants me to be his mom and not a photographer, and sometimes it's hard for me to let go of being a photographer, and so I push hard, and then sometimes I have to back off. There is an image which actually worked out really well, which is Nikolai with like a braid being held out, and the original image was this image of Nikolai and Bo in this really beautiful light, and Bo would not cooperate and was really difficult. And so I said, okay, get out of the photograph, just hold the braid. And then we made the image of Nikolai, which turned out far more interesting than the image I had in mind. But it was because Bo didn't really want to engage, and we had to move to something else, which, the serendipity happened that it actually came out to be a better image. So. And David,
can I just add one thing too? That it is great to see Nikolai and Bo aging together in that work, but I am still so moved by the pictures of you and Bo together are still always my favorites. And there's just something, I don't know if it's Freudian, or there's just something of how a child performs with a mother and a mother. There's something about the relationship and seeing you guys age together and your genetic link, and all of that stuff is so beautiful, and I think will be so meaningful for you guys. And not that the Nikolai work won't be, but on a very personal level, those pictures really resonate of the two of you together. I just, they're so amazing. I mean, every time I see one, there isn't a bad, even the stuff you post on Instagram, or just the snap, just how you two perform together and interact together, it's really pretty great. Yeah, baby. Making me feel good.
Thank you. Hey, David, since you're on,
yes,
maybe we could just talk a little bit about the class we are teaching this summer. And this is David Hilliard, everyone. And David is also an amazing photographer. I see some other photographers we're going to get to that are on as well. Terry's on. She's teaching this summer.
Yeah, that's great.
But David, maybe we could talk a little bit about the class you and I are teaching called Hunting and Farming the Photograph.
Yeah, that's why I've been thinking about that, and we both do that on our work a little bit. And so I don't know what you want me to.
Well, maybe you could just tell people what the idea of the class is.
Well, the idea of the class in the perfect non-pandemic world would have been us in the beautiful landscape as a group, looking at histories of picture making, both finding subject matter out in the world and just documenting it with the camera, like just letting the world happen the way it does. And then conversely, flipping that on its ear and staging / somehow intervening with that world and setting up and controlling certain elements. And so hunting being finding in the world, farming meaning constructing a picture, and looking at photographers, both historic and contemporary, who have done that. And then us as a group actually making work and looking at it within our, having a couple of exercises and asking participants to make works in both veins. Now we're going to be doing that, I think. I'm happy that we're going to try it, because what else? We just give up? I mean, I think we have to, do things like this and keep the creative work going. And so we're going to do it virtually, and people will be making work all over wherever they are. So we are going to propose a workshop where we look at work, we write about our work, we give assignments, and we convene online, and we critique work and meet with students privately or as a group. Am I saying the right things, Andrea? Do you want me to talk about this?
You're doing a great job.
Anyway, so I'm glad because this will be my first summer not being out there in a very long time. So it's even emotional for me to think about not coming back. So I think there's something really satisfying about muscling through and still having the experience. And we're just going to do it virtually. And in a way will be really interesting because everybody will be making work in their own domestic spaces, in their own backyards. So I think we can live vicariously through other geographical places and experiences and histories. So I think it'll be really, in the end, not what we wanted, but also something unexpected and surprising. So not unlike the question I just asked you about serendipity. So let's see, right?
Great, thank you.
Awesome.
And you know, as David and I have talked about the class we're teaching and that we may probably be moving it online, I know Sarah is also planning to teach with us, and whether we do it, you know, that may be a class that we move online as well. And Sarah, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about it as well. And I know Jeremy is also on the phone, so maybe we could give both of you opportunities to talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing now with all of this, as a photographer, as an image maker, but also what you're thinking about with classes and how you would sort of manage that.
Sure. Do you want to give me access to the screen and I can show a bit of how I've been thinking about things these days? We've got I think you're controlling the screen. Or can I take that?
Now you should be able to go ahead and share your screen, but Andrea needs to stop sharing hers.
Okay, hold on.
I love everything I learn about Zoom on a daily basis.
Okay.
Always on the spot too.
Hey, you know what? The best thing about it is everybody's just kind of like, oh yeah, whatever, it's Zoom, it's pandemic, what do we know? So there's no,
Okay.
Woo, there you all are, grid.
Yeah, so Sarah, you can go ahead and share your screen and
Yeah, I will.
what you've been doing.
I'll just chat real quick for a minute before going to the screen with just, it's amazing that Zoom allows us to build like what actually feels like a real sense of community to me. The biggest frustration is not being able to touch someone. I'll refer to that in a little bit in the work I've been doing. My work, you know, when I came into photography is because I was a reporter, a journalist who I'd lost my faith in words. So I came into photography in very different ways. And I've always had a very strong emotional connection to the work where I'm not working literally, but often I'm comfortable, you know, just in conceptual and metaphorical, very layered spaces. And the workshop I'm teaching this summer is like my favorite thing to teach, because it's all about how to access everything that's not in your head. It's a way of like sticking your head in a closet. And actually we use your head like this much. And then it's like, I shove it as much as possible in your closet and try to activate all these other ways of experiencing imagery, which is about, because I think in our minds, we can all learn the rules of photography. We all know what we want to, you know, like who we want to shoot like, or what light we want to do, or you've got rule of thirds in your heads, or so many voices in our heads. And this class is really about how you shut those voices off, including your own, because those are the voices that are most likely to yield images that other people would make, and then accessing these spaces of feeling. When the virus just smacked everybody in the head here in Los Angeles, it sort of happened overnight. I belong to 7 Photo Agency, and I kind of corralled us all into creating diaries. It's called Notes from the Pandemic. And the diary I had already started making is called These Days. And for me, in many ways, it references back that Jackson Browne, very sort of mournful song, These Days. But they aren't necessarily images that anybody would be making around a Corona diary. I'm gonna show you, there's only 15 in it now. I've got to add a few more, but the diary is actually changing from these early days. It's going to be getting a bit darker now as I'm trying to come to grips with why I don't see in California what my friends see in New York. It's a different world here. It's a very distanced world from what the pandemic looks like. But I'm just going to run through these, and then I'll read you some of the shorter entries just so you can see what I'm up to. but it did start with this picture. That first picture is called The Beginning. This is interlude, 2x2.
We can't see.
Hang on. Let me go back. Thank you for pointing that out. Let
Yeah,
me see
sure.
what I'm doing. Oh, you know what? I need to hit the share my screen button. Yep. I want to share that screen. Let's try it. Does that work?
Yep, got it.
Oh, yay. Okie doke. Let me put that up. Right. So this is the beginning. Where did I put that? Hang on. Then this is interlude, 2x2. Between the Rains. Interlude blue. I did not make this photo. Interlude Johanna. You know what I'm talking about. Interlude Kristen. The Dogs. Interlude Mr. Rogers. Interlude The Light. Interlude Pete's Dreams. Interlude I Haven't Had Much to Say. Interlude Red. These Days. So I'm going to go. I want to read. The first one explains why I began the diary. It was about a world closing down. Well, I felt my heart was opening up, and that I needed to find a way to document that. This is actually, it was the first day I made a cake. Every Sunday I've been making a cake that I give away in the neighborhood to walkers going by, because everybody walks in this neighborhood. And so this is the opening text for the diary, and this picture sort of shapes what I'm doing. And I kind of reveal at the end, it's a birthday cake for my niece who's 2,000 miles away. So this is because I used to be a writer. Obviously I've gained my faith in words again, but I'll just read you to the briefer entries. And the workshop I'm teaching is without words, but these are places you can go, I find, once I incorporate them again. And this one is Between the Rains, March 20th. It's been pouring in Los Angeles, off and on for days. To my mind, the rain started coming right around the time that coronavirus started becoming a topic of daily conversation here. Every time a new burst of showers starts tapping on my roof, I can't help but think about things being cleansed and about the constant #1 reminder to everyone, everywhere, to wash their hands. A photographer friend of mine in Jordan emailed me the other day from her home in Amman, where the government has told residents to stay inside. She spoke of things she'd read about the pandemic being a result of humans' massive interference with the earth and its ecosystems. Sitting at home right now, looking through the window, streets are empty, she wrote. For the past few days, it's raining and thunderstorms. I wonder if it's Mother Nature taking matters in its own hands, washing away everything, protecting us again. Once again, I say it all fits in as we wait for the aftermath of all this. I can't help but be hopeful that at the end, like after a fire, the land will live to produce again. There was a short, sharp outburst of rain yesterday, and when I came out of my studio into the garden, the sun was shining brilliantly, everything green and bright and wet. I think my friend Nadia Basesio is right, that the land and that we humans will live to produce again. Happy first day of spring, Nadia, from Los Angeles to Amman. And then there's only the ones that are interludes. I didn't write text with them. This one is actually very short. Still life with cats and unmade bed. At least I wore pants today and not pajama bottoms. And then this one, The Dogs, March 24th, 2020. I live on an urban mountain just north of downtown Los Angeles. It's possible that it's just a fairly big hill. I remember looking up what it takes for a hill to be considered a mountain back when I was in elementary school, and I lived on a hill near the harbor. But since mountain is part of the name of this neighborhood, that's what we call it. It's always been a place where people are out walking, but these days there are a lot more people out crisscrossing trails, stopping to watch hawks catch air currents and drift overhead, nodding at people walking in the opposite direction or crossing the street to avoid them, because everyone is staying 6 feet away from each other now, or more, except the dogs. By some small miracle, by some saving grace, pets aren't known to transmit the virus. So while their humans stand back, I greet the dogs who are out walking. I scratch their ears. I laugh when they lick me. I rub my hands in their fur. Touch. It's what I miss the most.
Hey, Sarah, I wonder while we have some viewers, if you could just sort of briefly talk about like the workshop that you are hopefully going to be able to teach this summer, just so people can know like what to expect and just a brief synopsis of what might happen.
I tried to give that information before I went into those pictures. Let's see how to, let me get off my sharing. I want to get off screen sharing here. It's a series of questions that are posed to you. Boy, how do I get, Andrea, how did you stop sharing? There it is.
I can do it.
It's a series of questions that you're given. When I don't tell the questions in advance, it's kind of a secret society once you've had the workshop. You do have a poem with every exercise. It's a problem solving exercise for each day. And what more to tell you? It's about what I said at the beginning, learning how to tap that space inside of you that doesn't know how to answer the question. You know, it's about learning how to listen to, it's not, sometimes the class is called Finding Your Visual Voice. We retitled it for Anderson Ranch. But it's very much understanding that you already have a visual voice. It's learning how to hear it. So these photos I showed here are very much answers to the questions that I ask in the workshop, which I really don't tell.
That's okay. Well, thank you so much for hopping on. We really appreciate it. And I know Jeremy is on here still, I think. And
I am.
Yeah. Hey, pal.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you doing through all of this? Are you?
This is my first Zoom. I'm somehow missed out. Like, there's something about being a freelance photographer. You don't have to talk to a lot of people.
You don't. Sometimes it's kind of nice though.
It is.
But are you working from home mostly, or
Yeah,
how are
we're-
things?
Staying in place or sheltering in place, I guess, is what we're all doing. Congratulations to everybody. I see it on the top of my screen. You're all doing a good job. You're all in your homes.
Yeah, we are obeying. Yeah. Well, we
yeah,
just wanted to. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, some of my work portal is very easy to do it at home. The one project that I've been on for a few years and continuing to do, I can try and share a screen. I'm gonna hit the green button that says share screen.
Hang on one second. I may have to give you permission.
Do I have to give it up again? No, I turned off.
Yeah, you're turned off. Let me see. Wait, where are you, Jeremy? Okay.
I don't know. Home, just a few miles away.
Okay, now you should be able to share your screen if you want to share an image or two, and then
Yep,
maybe
I won't
just
take.
give a brief
here we go.
idea of maybe the couple one-day workshops you're going to teach this
Yep,
summer too.
Absolutely. Post it just in. Let's see. Share. What does everybody see? Like snowflakes?
Yes.
Okay. So the last few years I've been working on projects involving sort of extreme macro images, particularly what I think of as portraits of snowflakes. So one of the kind of beautiful things about this project is it's still snowing. It's April, I don't know what it is. Nobody probably knows what it is. April 7th or something. And, you know, it snowed, I guess last Friday. It's supposed to snow again this weekend. So there's still opportunities out there just on my front porch to do this kind of work. One of the things I love about this time of year actually is that the snowflakes are starting to change quite a bit. They're much more temporary. They disappear much faster. They transform much faster. Let's see if I could get a melty one. They start to look a lot more like these watery things, which actually has also been kind of resonant during these times. To actually, you can, over the course of photographing these things, they disappear. They literally go from these beautiful crystals like this into something watery like this in a matter of with the kind of temperatures we've been getting in 10, 15, 20 seconds. And something about watching that basically transforming from something amazing and beautiful and intricate to a drop of water over the course of 30 seconds is, it speaks to the times in some way. It speaks to temporality. But so anyway, that's still been keeping me busy on the home front. Let's see if I can stop share. And am I back?
You are back.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much.
The classes I'm teaching it's actually several classes at the ranch this summer. Some iPhone workshops, which are great for beginners, but also, frankly, I find them somewhat terrifying because it's actually good for people who've been at this a while. Taking photos with my iPhone scares the bejesus out of me. I like to have a big, bulky 10-pound piece of something in front of my face when I'm taking a photo. It's scary. It's like taking photos naked to have one of these little guys. You can't hide behind apertures and shutter speeds and off-camera lights and all these other things. So we've got several of those. I think maybe 3 iPhone workshops, and then the other one is night photography, which is actually great for people who are a little further along. And actually a good reminder for people who are interested in low light photography or night photography. Tonight's a full moon, or tomorrow night maybe. But anyway, if you go out there tonight, you're gonna have plenty of light where even with an iPhone that you'll be able to take a fairly decently exposed photo. So if you spend some of the night like not sleeping like I think a lot of us are doing now, it actually will be a good night for photography. And I just want to say thank you to you and Andrea also. This was really amazing. Andrea, I love seeing your work, and I love seeing all these humans up here.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Who knew technology could be so convenient? We have one last question to Andrea in the comments, so I just kind of want to read that. So Rob says, throughout the history of photography, a certain level of work that is achieved through a high level of intimacy seems to have been traditionally reserved for the male photographer and their female model. This is usually their wife or muse, Stieglitz, Weston, Callahan, all those. I love how Andrea turns this stereotype on its head with her extraordinarily intimate work that we see between the boys, between her and the boys, and her and her son. Do you have any comment on that, Andrea?
Rob, did you go to school for photography? Teach photography? Yeah, no, I hadn't really thought about that often historically it had been done by males, I guess. But I guess I'm referencing, my role models in this kind of work have definitely actually been women photographers who have done this kind of work. I hadn't really thought about it that way. But I think about so many photographers, I guess men and women, that have worked in photographing their wives or their children or those that are close to them, and not in a way that objectifies them, but actually connects with the intimacy. And I guess those are my role models, whether it's, Sally Mann or Emmett Gowan or, I can't even think of names right now, but I mean, those are the people that definitely influence me in moving in this direction for making this kind of work.
Thank you for answering that question. I think Catherine is not on. Catherine, are you here? No, she is not. Well, anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for logging on. We will certainly be doing this again next month, so be sure to look on the website for links for the next Zoom meeting. And also, I think Thinker Thursday is going to be now a virtual meeting as well. So if you had the privilege of attending those here on campus, it's going to be pretty great. And then also, if you weren't here to be present for Thinker Thursday, you can certainly enjoy them now virtually. But thank you guys, everyone, for joining in. We hope you enjoyed it, and please join us next week or next month, May 5, Cinco de Mayo. So we'll have a party. But thanks, guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I put my email in the chat. So please connect if you have any other questions or any other ideas or any other interest in workshops, anything like that. So we'll be signing off.
Thanks for organizing.
Of course. Happy to.
Bye, Robbie.
Thank you.